All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Great, so like I said, welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for today's Data and Dialogue session. My name is Tess Conway and I'm the Program Coordinator for the Urban Curricular Programs. This Data and Dialogue series was developed by Chicago Studies, a program of the college that offers curricular and co-curricular opportunities for the college community to study, engage with, and positively impact the diverse communities of our world-class city. The Data and Dialogue series offers participants a behind-the-scenes look at a Chicago-relevant dataset, archive, or other resource for research about the city. This session will introduce participants to the Chicago History Museum's Research Center, which holds the printed material, archives and manuscripts, prints and photographs, architectural drawings, and assorted ephemera of the Chicago History Museum. Tonight's presenter is Ellen Keith, the Director of Research and Access and Chief Librarian at the Chicago History Museum, which she has served since 2012. Prior to joining the museum, Ellen held library positions at Johns Hopkins University, the Illinois Institute of Technology, Columbia College Chicago, and St. Xavier University. Ellen is an active member of the Chicago Collections Consortium and is currently serving as the board chair. Ellen received her Bachelor of Arts in Victorian Studies from Vassar College, her Master of Library and Information Sciences from Dominican University, and her Master of Liberal Arts from Johns Hopkins University. Again, thank you so much for being here, all of you, and Ellen, I'm excited to get started.
Thanks, Tess. I'm excited to be here. I have a lot to talk about, so I organize my thoughts best through a PowerPoint. So yay, PowerPoint. So I'm going to share my screen. And let's start. Okay, so the Chicago History Museum and me. So who we are, Tess has already said. So besides, bottom line, we serve anything paper or photographs. If it's two-dimensional, if it's perfectly flat, we serve it. And in a normal era, non-pandemic, you could walk into the research center and ask us to retrieve that for you and see it. We're in a slightly different era right now, which I'll talk about, but I'm going to stress right off the bat that we're free, which is very important. We're a library, we should be free. In our pandemic times, we are only able to accommodate 6 researchers per day and by appointment only, and that's Tuesday through Friday from noon to 3:30. When normal operations resume, when everyone is fully vaccinated, when herd immunity is achieved, there is really no cap on the number of people we allow. Appointments are not required. Bottom line is, everyone is welcome. So this has been a little hard for us to say to people, no, you have to make an appointment. When in normal times, we were just, come on in. So we're hoping to get back to normal times soon. The research center is just one room. Here is a photo of it. There is an other side to it, but sometimes people will walk in and say, so this is it? And we say, yes. The bulk of our materials are stored around the museum. And so researchers are really just sitting at one of our tables, filling out call slips, giving them to us, and we're retrieving the material for them. So we really are just one room of big researcher tables. You can see the microfilm machines. Microfilm is still very big in our world, and some computers to look things up on. Who visits us or emails us? Basically everyone. I started off with a lot of education. We see a lot of undergraduate students, graduate students, junior high, high school, their teachers, architects. This is very big with us. House historians, family history enthusiasts, documentary filmmakers, preservationists, bottom line, anyone with a question about Chicago. I will tell you, during pandemic times, documentary filmmakers do not believe there is a pandemic. They're operating on pretty tight deadlines. They have been emailing us frantically. One thing to think about in terms of the Chicago History Museum is its long history. So I want to start with the fact that it started as the Chicago Historical Society in 1856. And if you think about that founding, Chicago was only 19 years old at that time. On March 4th is the anniversary of the incorporation date of March 4th, 1837. So when you start a Chicago Historical Society in 1856, there's not a lot of Chicago to collect at that point. So there wasn't a great deal of city material. There's more of an Americana focus. 1920 was a game changer for us. That's when the Historical Society acquired the estate of Charles Gunther, and he had many titles. He was a candy salesman, he was an alderman, and he was also a dime museum guy. He imported the entire structure of the Libby prison from the South and made the Libby Prison War Museum up in Chicago. And he acquired all of these things. He acquired Lincoln's deathbed. He had a ton of Revolutionary War materials. The story is he has the snake from the Garden of Eden. So when we acquired Gunther's material, we just got both physical, three-dimensional material that made us more like a museum and even more archival material. So going on, there is a long tradition, as you can imagine, is something founded in 1856 by men, a long tradition of sort of dead white men archival records. In 1955, along comes Archie Motley, and Archie Motley was the son of an African-American painter, Archibald J. Motley. And if you haven't heard of him, I encourage you to Google his works, they're fantastic. And his German wife. And Archie looked Caucasian, and grew up in Englewood. He was really an activist archivist. He came in and he was aggressive. He went out to communities and said, we need to represent you in our archives. So we have papers like the Woodlawn Organization, the Catholic Interracial Council of Chicago records, and many other social service organizations because of Archie's activism. And that really diversified our holdings. Archie was named Archivist Emeritus in 1998, passed away in 2002. I never met him. A colleague of mine worked with him, and he's the kind of person where we talk about him so much, you would have thought he was still alive because we just talk about him so much, because he really was transformational in terms of how we began to think of ourselves as a contemporary archives. In 2005, 2006, the Historical Society renovated the interior and then reopened as a Chicago History Museum. And that was a way to sort of brand ourselves, take away sort of the gatekeeping way of a historical society, how that sounds. It sounded too off-putting, but a Chicago History Museum seems much more welcoming. In terms of recent acquisitions that we don't have an Archie Motley. We don't have the staff to dedicate themselves to going out into the community anymore. But we do have acquisitions that we do get and we do go after. So we have the Special Olympics records. And that's partly because of two things: our relationship with the Chicago Park District, because we sit on Park District land, and that came out of the Park District, and Ann Burke, because she was initially one of the movers and shakers in the Chicago Special Olympics. A couple years ago, we acquired the Rayburn Flurlage photograph collection. He was a blues photographer. We sit on the corner of North and Clark and Lincoln Park, so our focus can sometimes be a little more the north side of Chicago, and one thing we know we don't represent well all the time is more of the south side of Chicago, which is the blues, chess records, all of that. So the Flurlage photographs represents that. And you may have seen in the news recently our Chicago Sun-Times photograph acquisition. So I'm going to talk about some of our materials. So in terms of our archives and manuscripts, we have about 22,000 linear feet of materials. This is a challenging year for us. In addition to a pandemic, we're having a storage renovation. This is long overdue, but this means that we cannot there's no place to sort of cram 22,000 linear feet of archival materials elsewhere in the building while their huge storage space gets renovated. So we have palletized and shrink wrapped and moved the bulk of these offsite. We're able to keep about 600 linear feet on site in our offices. So we are able to help people. We still want to be able to help people in this challenging year. In terms of an archival collection, people ask us that. It can be a single letter, it honestly can, or thousands of boxes. I'm thinking of the Paul Douglas records papers, which are thousands of boxes, Carol Moseley Braun, thousands of boxes, that kind of thing. We have personal papers, we have organizations records, we have company records, we have Marshall Fields and Company, we have Montgomery Ward. So we have a huge variety. And I wanted to show you some examples of finding aids, just in terms of how people approach our records. And whoops, let me go back. So we've got the Chicago Teachers Union records. A lot of my examples are always driven by like, what's going on in real life right now? And Chicago teachers strike. This is a collection we've acquired over the years. We've added and added to it. So we do have material from the 2012 strike already, which is great. Sometimes in terms of archives, you really kind of stop short. Like 2000s is really recent for us. So it's great that we have things from the 21st century, but this is the finding aid for the Chicago Teachers Union records. This is how people try to access, I don't mean to say try, how they access what they need to find. There's a lot of stuff to read in a finding aid. And I'm just showing you this one because it's going to look different from the next one I show you. So this goes on and on. It's boxes, it's volumes, it's all of these other things, financial records. Teachers have come up and looked up their records. So let's see. Tess, did I mess myself up with my PowerPoint?
You should be able to click on it and there you go.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. One of the fun things about, in our sort of very intimate space and researchers who come in, these are books that have been published by, scholars that have used our papers. And I know all these people. I find that awesome. So, these are people who come in, they're like old friends. They retrieve the material, they go through it, and out comes a book. So just some great variety of examples. Juliet Kinsey, early Chicago, and Dominic Pasiga, the slaughterhouses. Sidney Yates was a congressman, and Michael Dorff and George Van Dusen wrote a book about him. And we had his papers, and they found us the funding to get those processed. Simon Balto's Occupied Territory, which makes use of our African American Police League records. It's just really exciting to see something come out of multiple visits to the research center and know that we've helped in somebody's scholarship. Prints and photographs. We have over 6.5 million images, but do recall that about 5.5 million of those are from the Sun-Times, which is a fairly recent acquisition. We have photos of individuals, and those are searchable in our catalog, just as if you just typed in a name and limited it to a photograph. You're going to see if we have a photo of a person. We have tons. We have photos organized by subject. Photo research can be challenging, and this is what's been challenging while we've been closed, because it's been a very hands-on thing. So people are often interested, house historians want to see an old picture of their house. So if you've got an address on Hyde Park Boulevard, you actually have to request the folder that's labeled Streets, Hyde Park Boulevard, Illinois, Chicago from us, and flip through it to see if we have your address. We may or may not. We have photos of buildings. So we've got the temporary city hall of 1871. We have collections by photographers. So Mildred Mead, Rayburn Fleurlage, who I mentioned, the Hedrick Blessing architectural photography firm is a huge collection that we have. And then we have collections from papers. So we have the Chicago Daily News collection and our recent Chicago Sun-Times collection. Published material. I always have to give out a shout out to our published material. I know people think, archival material is very unique, and I get that. A photo is something very tangible. You look at and you see. We've got a lot of unique published material. I don't know that it always gets the love it needs to get. So we have a lot of great history. So we have annual reports from the Board of Education. You get to read this fun local note to see all the years that we have that can be very challenging to read. Let me go back. Let's see. Sorry about that. We have secondary sources held by other libraries as well. We like to think of ourselves as one-stop shopping. If you're going to spend an afternoon with us, you also may need something that you could find in another library, just, so you can spend the whole time with us. So even though Chicago Public might have it, while you're doing your research, you need to have access to it. We have a great menus collection. that is absolutely enormous. So old menus, even going up to one of my colleagues got the last menu from, and I'm going to blank on the name, but the restaurant at the Drake that people loved. So we have that as well. Theater program collection is very large. This is part of sort of the ephemera that we consider. It's so large that our finding aid is split by into 3 finding aids by theater name. But it's always just a fun sort of trip down memory lane to see what those are. We have newspapers. I'll talk about those a little bit in terms of talking about microfilm, but we have a newspaper attic where we have the physical print newspapers, and then we have newspapers on microfilm. We have a huge collection of school yearbooks, so that's among our published materials. And I just had to show this off. We have very unique items. So once a year, we usually do an open house for our colleagues just to remind them of what we have and how they can use the research center. This is one I pulled out a couple of years ago, and I have to take pictures of everything. So it's very fortunate at the time that I'm working at home, I had all these pictures saved. This is truly the guide to the best public ladies room in downtown Chicago. Who knew that somebody was going to put that into a physical book and get it published? But this is just my favorite part. Needless to say, this is the Chaz A. Stevens building, 8th floor. Needless to say, this bathroom is useless for anything but frightening and horrifying oneself. Only those who feel they can look death and disease in the face with impunity should venture here. What does the Chicago Department of Health do? So we have the very scholarly books, but in case you needed to know, this snapshot of time, this is published in the 80s, about the best ladies' restrooms in Chicago. There we are. Microfilm. So microfilm, I want to stress this, and maybe I don't need to stress this with this group, but normally if we were open, this is the time of year we'd be seeing students from Chicago History Fair. They get very excited about microfilm, and they come up to us and they say, I think I need to see microfilm. And I'm like, actually, you would need to request something that happened to be on microfilm. Microfilm is just a container. It's not about the content. I always have a bad analogy for this, but it holds the content. It's just a way of holding that content. So we have newspapers on microfilm. We have dissertations on microfilm. We have some microfilm archival material on microfilm, and we have building permits on microfilm. Building permits is a huge thing with the house historians. We have building permits from 1872, the year after the fire. I always have to think about that, 1872 to 1954 on microfilm. And people are always interested in looking up the history of their homes. We do that a lot as well. We have maps. We have the Sanborn fire insurance maps. I was asked when I was talking with Tess and Chris about this, what material gets me excited? I have to say it's the Sanborn fire insurance maps. I don't know if anyone has seen these before, but they are enormous. They're, they take up half the size of one of our reading tables. And they are footprints of buildings. So they're the outline of a neighborhood in a certain time and place. So Chicago has multiple volumes. One volume is only a fraction of a Chicago neighborhood. And my colleague and I did an evening for members on Sanborn fire insurance maps. And I pulled out this one. This is, I think, 1954. It's hidden. But it was Comiskey Park. And somebody actually wrote in Babe Ruth's homer, and then he never hit one this far. We don't condone writing in material, but it came to us this way, and I love that. Sanborn maps are also just very tactile. If they were very expensive to reprint, so when things changed, in Chicago, we love to tear things down, we love to add things. What the Sanborn map people did was they pasted corrections over the pages. So you get sort of an architectural layer of, archaeological layer of paper pasted over and over, so you can see all the changes where there once was a 2-story dwelling, there is now a 4-story flat, that kind of thing. Architectural drawings, the other type of material we serve. Chicago is really known for its architecture. I'm still sad about Blair Kamin. taking the buyout. And we have an incredible collection. I think it's probably only second to the Art Institute of Chicago, with one problem. It is organized by the architect's name. So you have to know the name of your architect before we can determine if we have the drawings of that architect. And this is just the way things go in a small, we're relatively small for a museum, small staff museum. These architectural job sheets live in what we call gray binders. And I have a staff member who is the architecture whisperer, and he knows how to interpret these gray binders. We know that can't go on forever. So one of our pre-pandemic projects, which has been working during this pandemic, is a staff member has been entering all this information from job sheets into Excel. And ultimately, we will have at least a rough finding aid where you could enter an address and determine if we have those architectural drawings. So that's going to be a great thing for us. Our online resources, we start with Archie, named after Archie Motley. And here's our disclaimer up above about the material that's off-site. This has everything in it. So this is where you would go to search for all of our material, whether it's published, archival, photographs. It does not include really the architectural drawings. As I mentioned, those are still sort of in gray binders. There's some catalog records for them, but not always. One of the things about Archie is that after you've done a search, you can limit that search by type of material. So you can start off with the broadest search possible, but say, I only want archival material about that, and then limit that search to see what we have on archives. Our image database. This is fantastic. So as Tess mentioned, I've been at the museum since 2012. This front-facing database dates back, I think, only just to about 2017. It's not run by my department, it's run by the Rights and Reproductions Department. So it's primarily for licensing purposes. So it's images that people have requested that we've digitized, images that we know people are going to request that have been digitized. But it's a great source for finding what we have. I will caution people, I've got this on a later slide, it does not represent everything that we have. It's just not possible. But we've got a recent Vivian Meyer acquisition. We have, clearly we wanted to see what did the flu pandemic of 1918 look like, the trial of Chicago 7, Century of Progress. It's just a fabulous way to sort of get lost in our great photography collections. Encyclopedia of Chicago is a resource that we, along with the Newberry and Northwestern University, collaborated on. And this is just a good starting point for research. This happens when we work with kids doing history fair or people looking for background. Even for ourselves, if somebody says something, and I think that doesn't sound familiar to me, I'll usually go to the encyclopedia. Research Center guides. So these are guides that my staff and I work on. So for those of you in academia who are used to LibGuides, well, I think they're getting more out of getting into other types of libraries as well. These are LibGuides. So these are things that we have control over. And so a lot of great starting points. One of our most popular ones is building and house history. So just, it's a great way, especially since we've been closed, is to, people send us an email and say, I'd like to do research on my house. In this guide, we outline everything you could possibly want to find out and where you'd find it, and indicate which items you could find if you were working from home. Going back to those building permits on microfilm, one thing that recently happened too, it's just fun to see the things that have happened over the years, is that, yes, I was right, 1872 to 1954 for our microfilm. We and UIC are the only ones that have this microfilm. And a couple of years ago, UIC digitized their microfilm, which is fantastic. So they now have a way, you can browse it as though you were, they also made a LibGuide about it. You can browse it as though you were searching the microfilm. It's not the quick, easy fix people would like. It's just the microfilm is not, that requires a lot more attention than anyone has right now. But I know they're taking that second step towards doing that. But this is what's happening in special collections. We're moving more and more into what can we digitize and make online, especially this year, which has taught us, that people are unable to travel. We have done a lot of Google Arts and Culture online exhibits. And they all work around collections that we have. Joseph H. Jackson is a recent one. He was a contemporary of Dr. King's, not a fan of Dr. King's, which is always interesting. Some more about fashion. I do want to share this one. We have things that we know. We have things that we know strike people. And one of the things that we know people love, as we have our menu finding aid, is anything to do with Chicago's restaurants. I think it was Greg Borzo. Somebody has recently written a book on Chicago restaurants that we have in the research center. But people just love anything to do with the history of Chicago's restaurants. So I had a volunteer one semester. She was a library school student, and she put this together. She had the best time. It was one of the things that we sent out during our first closure, like the museums at home email that we do, and people love it. It's just, there are things, Chicagoans have things that they love. Restaurants is one of them. So what makes us special? I'm hoping this slide does indicate what I think makes us special. We are not a comprehensive collection of Chicago. We're not a city department. The official archives of City Hall got not sort of rejected by City Hall, and that became the municipal reference collection at the Harold Washington Library. So what we are is, we're 1856 to 2021 of acquisitions that have been cultivated by individuals. So, yes, there are principles we abide by, collections that we want to get, but you always have to remember it's an individual sort of like making those decisions, just like Archie Motley made that decision to go after more of the everyday person, that, the day-to-day life of Chicago. The other thing too is that donors decide where to donate. So people might look at us and say, well, I don't know if that, maybe you're not the best home for my papers. So the Newberry Library has a more literary focus. UIC Special Collections has a more political focus. And so what's our focus? I find it hard to have sort of a through line of our focus. I just wouldn't say, it's varied over the life of the institution. We have city milestones. So we have the fire archives. We have all the fire narratives, and we're having a fire exhibit for the 150th anniversary of the fire this fall. We have the World's Columbian Exposition archives. We have Lincoln's materials. So it's hard to say that there's one sort of driving theme. Over the years, it's as you would, if you're a collector and you bring in things, that's what we've done. When I was talking to Tess and Chris about this presentation, they had mentioned Carl Smith's talk a couple of weeks ago. And we know Carl, his recent fire book, and I was watching his talk, and he was talking about the fact that, fire narratives were from people who were literate. I mean, that's the thing in archives. You collect what is out there. There's a whole community of people whose papers you may not get. They may not think that you're the right home for them. All the things that we think are important now, maybe people weren't documenting then. I mean, I know in terms of the people who ask us questions about the World's Columbian Exposition, I know people wish there'd been a lot more documentation, a lot better photographs of every single item in every single exhibition. But it's sort of the through line of history in terms of like that we're seeing now is that we need to encourage people to share those, to save those and share those. So where to start? I always tell people starting with a keyword search of our catalog, limiting results by material type. One of the things that we've done, and again, a lot of things have come out of being closed for this pandemic. We were closed from March to July. We've been closed again from November and we'll reopen March 4th. And while we were closed, there were certain projects that we could sort of take the time for, one of which was adding digital surrogates to our catalog. So if anyone here has used HathiTrust, it's a fabulous resource. We have a ton of material that is out of copyright and probably in HathiTrust. And I have two colleagues in my department who have been doing that. And we've added 464 links to online resources in our catalog. To find those, use HTTP to search first. Browse or search our image database, and please note not all of the images that we have been digitized. So there is still some legwork in terms of if you're looking for a particular image coming in to see us and going through the actual photographs themselves. Email us. We did a ton of email business when we were closed and we continue to do it. I have a fantastic reference librarian who goes above and beyond all the time, and she's just, I was in a meeting this morning and I said, she is the GOAT of reference librarians. It was also fun to listen to Carl's talk and hear that he called out our Explore Chicago Collections portal. So this is a great resource. He said it came in just as he was sort of like winding up his career. This is a great resource for who else has what. This is what we're always asked when I first started working at the research center. So this is our perennial. So you get these results, you get digital images, and then you see who else has things. So Chicago History Museum, 135, Art Institute of Chicago, 202. So this has been a fabulous resource for us. Whoops, sorry. I am a fast talker. Questions? I just raced through that. I am happy to talk about anything that people are interested in hearing about the Research Center. Go back and do any searching. Let me know, and I will stop sharing.
Great. Yeah, I have a few questions from the chat here, but I also want to encourage anyone to speak up if they have a question. Feel free to say it out loud. But actually, my first question was about Chicago Collections, so you kind of stole that from me, but happy to have that answered. One of Chris's questions was, in this COVID time, how does one go about making an appointment with you guys?
I am going to put that in the chat. We have an online, oh, we should probably put the HTTP in front of that. There. Yeah, so we have a dedicated page, and if you open it up, it gives you a register now link. So once the 6 appointment slots for the day are taken, you're just told that day is no longer available and you go and pick another day. One of the things that we're doing in these COVID times is that we are trying, even though people have started to get vaccinated, we're still not there. So we are minimizing our in-person interactions with people. So we're emailing people ahead of time once we have their reservation and asking them to give us the 5 items they want pulled ahead of time, just so they have something to start with when they come in. And they're welcome to ask for more. They're always, once they get there, but just to sort of minimize that face-to-face, you're talking to me, I'm talking to you. This is very strange for librarians. We don't like this at all, but to keep us all safe, that's what we're doing right now.
Definitely.
I had a question. Ellen, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm Emily Talon. I'm a faculty at University of Chicago. I was wondering if any of your maps have been digitized in the sense of being GIS'd, like are they actually spatially referenced?
They are not. And oh, Emily, it's so sad because a couple of years ago, Cecilia Smith from the Regenstein contacted me, and we put in, was it the Clear Hidden Collections grant? We put in a grant where a whole multi-year thing to digitize maps, put GIS layers over them. And I was just a small part of that. She did so much work on this grant and we did not get it. I mean, hopefully one day. Yes, Cecilia Smith, yay, hi. It was clear, thank you. It was so disappointing. That was so much work and it would have been so exciting.
Oh, well, we'll try again someday.
Yes, yeah, I mean, it's really worth funding. It's just, I've had grants that have been denied as well. And it's just
Frustrating, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Ellen, I had a question that came up for me as you were talking, particularly as you were talking about sort of the way in which your collection has been so shaped by the individual interests of the collectors over the years. And I guess this is really a two-part question. One is very general. Does CHM provide any information, or is there any kind of metadata available through CHM about your role of collectors, the folks who have built these collections over the years? And then secondly, has anyone done kind of a deep study on Archie Motley? Where are Archie's papers? Because for people out there who are looking for a BA thesis, that sounds like a great one to me.
Oh, I know, Chris. I don't know that we have a sort of a write-up on who's collected over the years. We have, now that let me put it into the chat, because we have a donation page where we basically say what we're not collecting at this time, things that we've stopped collecting. Like, I think we're not collecting any more World's Fair. We have enough. Let me just put that into the chat. And in terms of Archie Motley, somebody really needs to, I don't know who has his papers. I mean, we have CHS institutional archives, which are part of the material that's unavailable this year during our collection renovation. But I would love somebody to do a study of Archie Motley. I mean, as I said, I did not overlap with him at all, but I recognize his handwriting because, my colleagues have said to me that was Archie. And so now, if a folder comes out, I'm like, that was Archie. So yeah, that would be an awesome thing. And, one of the great things that happens is that MAC, the Midwest Archives Conference, sponsors an Archie Motley scholarship to attend. The BMRC has an Archie Motley intern each year. I mean, he was just phenomenal.
I also had another question. You spoke a bit about how the newer Sun Times collection has been one of the newer things that CHM has received. I was just wondering, what are some of the exciting things that were found in it, and where can people learn more about it?
The best way to go is go to the images database, the images.chicagohistory.org, and you can scroll. I mean, you can browse through, you can put in any sort of keyword you like. And sometimes, I think what's so exciting about the Sun Times collection is it's so contemporary. One of the things, in terms of digitized photographs, what we've really hung our hat on for many years is the Chicago Daily News images that are online, and those are 1902 to 1933, and that's where the funding stopped. So we have Chicago Daily News negatives up into 60s, 70s that are not digitized. So it's kind of sad that people can't get an idea of what's in those. The Chicago Sun-Times collection came, it's a long story. If anyone Googles Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago History Museum, Chicago Reader, there was a great story in the Reader about it years ago. A guy named John Roberts said to the Sun-Times, hey, I'm going to digitize your photos. Wouldn't that be great? And they said, hey, great. I'm paraphrasing. Don't take me as gospel here. And then he went to jail for, some sort of memorabilia incident. So all of the things that he had were sort of sold off to people. And a guy named Leo Bobby in Dixon, Illinois, bought the Sun-Times. So it's a mix of things that Roberts had already digitized, and I believe Leo himself digitized some of those things. Those are the things that we have available online in the images site now. And then we still have physical negatives, and I don't know when we're going to be able to get those digitized, but that's next in our plan. But it's just such a more, the Sun-Times is noted for its photography. I mean, it's and again, I was here when I moved back here from Baltimore. A couple years later is when they fired all their photographers and said all their reporters are going to use their iPhones now to take photos. So I'm glad that we have this collection sort of for the heyday of Sun-Times photography. But yeah, it's very, it's so diverse, which is great.
Love that. Cool. And then we just have another question here in the chat from Oscar that says, how does access to your stored material work during this year? Can people request materials that aren't on site?
Oh, Oscar, I'm so sorry. No, it's unfortunately, it's just unavailable. It is shrink wrapped and palletized. And of the 600 linear feet we kept, we tried, we know we can't make everyone happy, but we tried for some variety. So we have our alpha collections. Those are individually named collections that are smaller, that were easy to keep on site. We have our World's Columbian Exposition collections. We have some other, what we call expansion collections. And we have our Chicago Red Squad collection, which is a whole other talk, but that's the police department Red Squad. So we were able to keep those on site. We hope this year goes quickly, and we hope early in January 2022, those other collections are available again. So if you're in Archie, the catalog will say either available or unavailable.
Okay, great, thank you. And then we have another question from Alice that says, can you say more about the African American Police League records you have?
Absolutely, this is a really large collection as well. I want to say 200 to 300 boxes. And again, sort of accruals over the years. It's a great, I've attended a lot of presentations from the original men who founded it, and they've just been fascinating. So, a collection of, it used to be called the Afro-American Patrolmen's League. So that's how it started in the 60s, from Black policemen who were being marginalized by their white coworkers. And so it's a huge collection. And one of the great things that happened a couple of years ago was that ProQuest, which has a product they call History Vault, digitized the AAPL collection. So I know that University of Chicago Library subscribes to the History Vault. So at least while the AAPL collection is off-site this year, those records are available through History Vault. So that makes us feel a little better. But it's a fascinating collection. Simon Balto, who I referenced, yes, it's exactly, Chris. It's a really timely thesis topic. Simon Balto, who I referenced, used them. He's just a fascinating scholar who's really dug into police brutality. The men themselves are fascinating. Renault Robinson, Howard Safford, excuse me. So yeah, it's living history because these men are still alive. It's just fascinating.
Great. Are there any other questions before we sort of start to close up?
Don't close up. Ellen, I was curious about the digital exhibitions that you pulled out, like the platform for those was really, really beautiful. I know that we encourage students and faculty sometimes to build digital exhibitions with tools like Omeka. So this is a geeky question, but what's the tool you guys use? Because that was a lot more aesthetically pleasing than what we.
So this is Google's platform. So with all that entails, but I know, but we have been really happy with them. So we do our rights and reproductions photo lab does the digitization. Our communications department is the contact to Google. We provide everything, and then we get sort of a date that we know it's going to go live. We have something coming up actually this Friday on the 12th. And yeah, it's really, it comes out beautifully. We have also, so I know about Omeka, Chris. We have also in Chicago Collections realm, we do digital exhibits in Scalar, and that seems to work well too.
Great. Any other questions?
Oh no! Oh, I'm sorry. I see that Regenstein doesn't have, yeah, they don't have that part of History Vault. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Well, when the Research Center reopens, make an appointment and you can use it on our computers. It's such a huge, yeah, it's a huge product, and it's got many sort of libraries that you can subscribe to. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Ellen, maybe one more just kind of general question. As I said to you when we were talking about this session, I think that frequently University of Chicago students come to talks like this because they are kind of looking for something that's going to spark their interest. And at least in my experience, some of my best projects have been sparked by the excitement of other people. You've mentioned some of this along the way, but I'd just be curious to hear you say anything else about other collections or things in your collection that really get you excited, things that you've kind of lost an hour or two pursuing, or things that maybe you feel are kind of understudied.
Oh, well, one collection that I love is the Edgar Miller papers. And he was a designer, and I mean, things are sort of cyclical in the archival world. So one of his studio was down actually near the museum on Burton Place. And a couple of years ago, there was talk that, I don't know if it was going to get sold or repurposed or not, retain its Edgar Miller-ness. So that's when everyone's like, oh, the Chicago History Museum has Edgar Miller's papers. Will come. So that's kind of how I learn about some things that we have, by people coming in and being sparked by that. So yeah, it's a fabulous collection, and it's drawings. It's not just your traditional gray Hollinger boxes. It's large flat boxes of drawings and things like that. Yeah, it's very tangible. I still enjoy the photos of the World's Columbian Exposition. I mean, I do agree with the researchers. Why couldn't they have, done a close-up of this? But it is just the sheer size is just amazing, and the length of time and all the things that accompany it. So, it's not just the archives, but we have 7 volumes of the contracts, the concessions that people did to be at the fair. So that's pretty cool. And that is one of our collections that ProQuest would like to digitize next for History Vault. So, making it more accessible. Yeah, we just have so many great collections. Marshall Field is completely challenging. It's Marshall Field, so of course it's fascinating. But it's a company's record. So we have 2 Marshall Fields collections. We have one donated by Federated when Field was owned by Federated, and one donated by Target when Field was owned by Target. So it's challenging to explain this to people when I don't really understand it myself. But yeah, and I'm looking at Alexis's question. Oh, I think that's great. The Woodlawn organization is something I really love. I have a colleague who is, actually not a colleague, a practicum student who is working on a LibGuide for communities, you know, because Chicago loves its communities, its neighborhoods. And I've said, you know, look for collections that are born out of a community like the Woodlawn organization. So those types of things I love.
Wonderful, great. Any other questions here? I know we have about 10 minutes left. If anyone had any other last minute thoughts, questions, anything. Okay, but if not, I just want to say again, thank you so much for being here tonight, Ellen, and thank you to all of you for joining us. The recording of this evening's session will be available on the Chicago Studies website later this week. We will also include supplemental materials about this topic so that a lot of things that Ellen mentioned, we'll track them down and get them on that page so you can look more into it. And before we end the evening, I also wanted to add that the Chicago Studies Quarters applications are now open through February 17th. This spring's quarters offer some really cool topics, including adaptation, evolution, and mutation in Chicago theater, Chicago democracy in practice, Chicago Waters Metropolis, and design and build, renovating space sustainably in Chicago's South Side. Chicago Studies will also be hosting an open house this Friday directly following our conversation on the future of Chicago theater, which you guys should also join. It's going to be really fun. And during that open house, we're going to provide more information on Chicago Studies quarters, and we hope to see you guys there. And once again, thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll have a wonderful evening.
Thanks
Thank
for having me.
you.